So, I went to sleep at 3:30 a.m. this morning after having to do a Dubai airport run, which I'm sure most of us have done before. So, I'm going to summon my reserves of power. If you see me asleep in the bar later, just buy me a drink and give me a nudge. Hello, my name is Chris. Thank you so much for joining us today at the HCD Meetup. I have a quick question. How many, or who here, is this their first time at the HCD Meetup? If you could raise your hand. Oh, that's a good innings. Amazing. Okay, I like that. That's great to see new faces. Thank you so much for coming. This is our new place, our new home for Dubai anyway, at Dtec. A little bit more about that later. But yeah, great to see you all here. And let's hope we have a good evening of interesting conversations on design, and this one, research. So if you turn it on, Christopher. So, I'm going to start off with a thank you to Aspects, who are our sponsors. We've got Pete and Jack and Ewan as well. You can see two of them over there. I'm not sure where Jack has gone. Is he here?
Back.
Oh, he's at the back. There you go. So, Aspects, if you're looking for work, looking for that new role, or even building a team of designers or research or whatever it might be, Aspects are your go-to guys. They focus on creatives and design and all that great stuff. So highly recommend connecting with those guys and having a conversation. Great people to know. And yeah, thanks for sponsoring, guys. Always appreciated. We're here today at Dtec. This is the second time we ran an event here, and we love this space. It's just, yeah, as you can see, it's just perfect for what we need to do. Great networking. They even put some food on for us. Very much appreciated. But Dtec, if you don't know, obviously part of Dubai Silicon Oasis. But this whole area is really focused on startups and founders. So if you have a startup, you're thinking of creating one, it's a lot of work, but often worth doing, then this is the place for you for office space, for networking, for events like this one, but also investors, partnerships, and all the rest of it. Shazmin, who works at Dtec, is around somewhere. She's hiding even further at the back, right next to Jack. So if you do want to talk to Shazmin about Dtec, she is right there. Please connect with her later on. As always, we have our website, hcd.ae, if you haven't been to it. It's simple, it's lean, but it's got some good stuff on there. So I do recommend checking it out. We also put on our latest events as and when they're coming up. We have our team. Obviously, that's me in the middle. We have Jonathan, who's our founder, who will be on our panel tonight. Hence, I get the privilege of doing the opening, so we don't have to listen to him too much, because he'll have a lot of good things to say on research. So, hopefully our other panelists get a word in edgeways. And we've got Nada as well, who I believe is traveling to China right now. So hopefully we'll see her when she gets back at the next event. We're on the socials as well, of course. You can get us on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And one thing we always recommend, and I'm going to use Jonathan's words exactly here almost, is if you've come to this, write about it on LinkedIn, write an article, do a small post, tag the person sitting next to you into it, tag us into it, tag HCD, tag Aspects, tag as many people as you can. It really helps to obviously build our network, but build your network as well, and to show what the things that you're going to, you're getting involved with, all that great stuff. So I really recommend doing that. Even if it's just one key takeaway insight that you found, something that one of our panelists said, oh, that's changed the way you thought about maybe research as a whole or design. So highly recommend putting something on LinkedIn for that. We're also on YouTube. We've got well over 50 videos now from our events. There is so much content on there that I don't think is really being utilized, to be honest. If you have a project and you're thinking, I'm looking at a certain aspect, go on, have a search on the channel. There might be something there that's really helpful. The one specifically that I've seen a lot of people asking about, which I now push them to that because the content's there, is for portfolio building. So if you're looking for a new role, or your first role, or you're trying to build your profile, again, it's some amazing insights and content and some real experts. So highly recommend taking a look at that. So the first HCD event was 3 people. 3 people. And one of them was Jonathan, the founder. That's how many turned up to a book review on mobile first for UX. But that, I think, shows what consistency and dedication does. If you keep turning up and you keep putting your heart and soul into something, and not asking anything in return, then you end up where we are now today. I think that's a really fantastic achievement. So as you can see there, May 2013, which means this is officially 13th year anniversary, so round of applause, please. There's a lot of effort going into that. And as you can see, there's been some phenomenal events over the years. One's at Expo. We've done 3 conferences in combination with DDX, which this year's especially was unbelievable. And that will be back again next year around February, so keep an eye out for that. As I said, 3 conferences we've had. This is a 102nd event, which is fantastic. Over 10,500 participants. So yeah, some really great stuff there. We don't measure everything on metrics too hard, but it's still nice to see that growth going on. But we've also been working on something in the background, so I am actually going to ask Jonathan to jump in on this one. Something just a little bit extra to go alongside the meetup.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, everyone. It's really great to see great numbers again. As Chris was saying, something that both Chris and I have been working on for a long time, and it's taken us some time to really think about how do we want to go out to the market with this, is HCD Pro. From those 13 years, what we've heard year and year over and over again is this is all great, but I need a little bit more support. Both Chris and I have done mentorship for a long time, both volunteer, unpaid, as well as paid mentorship. But we haven't been able to hit as many people or gone out with as big a message as we wanted to. And what we're doing now is turning that idea of the meetups, of talks, of practicing what we do, into helping you build clearer pathways for your career, both as a leader and as an individual contributor. The skills that make you successful early in your career, even as a leader, and I've spoken to, it's great to see some of the leaders here tonight that I've been speaking to lately. This is a challenge Pete, Jack have spoken to me about, as well as many of you, is that what is that next step? How do I move from an individual contributor up the chain? And also, as a leader, how do I move forward? I need new skills. Most designers, regardless what kind of a designer you are, service design, research, content, there's new names popping up every day. They're taught how to design, how to practice that particular skill set. But what seniors leaders need, and this has been often the challenge for design, is other skills, commercial awareness. Do you understand the industry that we are in? Systems thinking. Could be design, could be research, could be service design systems. That real thinking, how do I influence my whole organization? How do I influence strategy at the highest level, not just with what my team is working on? And how do I measure the value of my individual designer, my team, and what we're here to fix in the first place? Design should shape organizations, not just the deliverables that we spend so much time on. But the industry lacks a standard for how to go about doing this. There aren't clear progression between company to company, even within a company, role to role. And there isn't that consistency around what are the expectations of a head of design, of a design leader, of a senior product designer, of a UX researcher. And Chris, tell us, how are we going to solve this problem?
Funny you should ask. We're going to solve that to begin with the Career Strategy Workshop. So this is a 2-hour session within the workshop itself, with 30 minutes before that to onboard an individual, and 30 minutes afterwards to do bespoke mentoring with that person. We're going to run through our new design capability standard, which is what and how you can set a benchmark to where you are in your career versus where you want to be. We're going to identify your gaps, and that, although that can be painful, that is where you grow the most. And the one thing that I really want to say is, and it took me too long in my career to do this, is you need to invest in yourself. Not in other people's training or works, in you. That's the one thing you can spend money on. It is the most return value for what you do. It's on yourself, because then that gets you a better promotion, gets you a better job, makes you grow as a professional. So the idea is that we look through this in depth. Every person has their own individual map that they put out. At the end of it, you walk away with this roadmap of clarity for your next role of promotion and how you're going to get there. I wish I had that when I was 10 years ago, 20 years ago as a designer. It would completely change my life 100%. So we're going to do that very, very soon on the 5th of June.
2 weeks.
2 weeks away.
And 1 day.
1 day. We still have an early bird price for this one at $499. We think that's quite good value considering there's about 50 years experience on this stage between the two of us. So if you're interested, please have a look at the QR, have a look at hcd.ae/pro or come and talk to us afterwards.
So one thing to be clear, the workshop is 2 hours. In the week leading to the workshop, we will have a half an hour call with you just to understand who you are, what you're trying to achieve, what great looks like. And then after the workshop, the week later, we will follow up with that roadmap that you've created based on everything you do in the 2 hours. So it's not just the workshop alone. We're trying to, like I said, take 3 months of one-on-one coaching, which we've both done separately. And it's an experiment, right? You are hopefully going to be the first people to try it, and we will iterate. Obviously, there's AI, there's automation that's going to go into it, but we really feel, as I'm sure you all know, this is human-centric, and you can't just rush to remove the human. You need to understand why and when.
Yeah, we've barely scratched the surface on this because we want to get on with the good stuff we have organized for tonight, but please come and talk to us if it's something that even sparks your interest a little bit. So thank you for that. So, that out of the way, the great, amazing stuff that we always have for meetups is here at the amazing price of free. So, yes, as I said, Jonathan's going to be on the panel today, but we have 2 other fantastic people. The first I'd like to introduce on stage is Nathan, who comes from his own little mini meetup, the UXR Dubai User Experience Research Community. And we got chatting to Nathan over the last few meetups where we met him, and we thought, yeah, we like this guy. He seems pretty switched on. I think he slipped Jonathan a few dirhams maybe, but he said, no, let's combine forces. Let's get your network down. They can be our network. If networks aren't networking, then what's a network, right? So Nathan, if you want to come on and come join us. Round of applause for Nathan. You guys can do a little bit more introduction of yourselves. And then we also have the lovely Shazmin, who's here who's a research psychologist, who's going to bring her expertise to the mix as well. So please, Shazmin, come in and join us. And then give me a second to do some microphone wizardry. But I'll pass this one over to Shazmin, ladies first. If you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be fantastic.
Thank you, Chris. Shazmin, please.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Dr. Shazmin Rishmawi. I'm a chartered research psychologist that's been working in user experience research. And also the co-founder of Facely, which is a biometric user research tool that aims to make biometric research insights accessible to everyone. I'll talk a little bit about my journey because I guess I've been in kind of different parts of my journey. So I started off my career in clinical forensic psychology. So I used to actually work in high secure forensic psychiatric hospitals. I guess I like to call it the ultimate training ground when it comes to empathy. And from there, I started working in mental health technology, and this became the basis of my PhD in HCI, which was all around how do we design technology for complex mental health experiences. Along the way, I've worked in software consulting, I've worked in AI, facial and voice AI, and more recently I've moved to the UAE and worked across the healthcare and banking industry. So that's me.
Awesome, welcome. Nathan, we're going to share the mic tonight. Do you mind just telling us a little bit about what brought you here?
Yes, thank you. So my name is Nathan. I am originally from the US, west coast of the US, and I've been always in the UX world ever since I joined the workforce, so for about just over 8 years now. So I consider myself like a traditional UXer, so UX design, UX research. I'm a big believer that the best designers are doing research and the best researchers are getting involved in the user experience and designing that user experience. I've always been in the product world, so I first joined a startup in Silicon Valley and then later joined a bigger company in San Francisco working on B2B SaaS. So I've worked in everything from B2C smartphones and smart home technology into B2B SaaS, and then moved over to Dubai and joined a design and research agency doing something radically different, which was designing the visitor experience to NEOM, which is the large Saudi giga project, the visitor experience to a national park there. And then most recently was working for a company called GoodNotes, which is another sort of B2C note-taking app, and they're trying to move into the B2B space. So, I mean, I'm a big believer that research should be involved everywhere, and it doesn't matter which industry you come from, or there's always something to be done in the way of human-centered design and user research. And I think bringing that sort of diverse perspective from radically different backgrounds of clinical psychology and different parts of the world and different industries is one of the big benefits of building amazing products.
Awesome. So tonight I'm going to be player coach. I'm also a researcher. I think Chris and I often up here and we introduce the meetup and we get on to the topic, but Chris, we rarely introduce ourselves. Not that it's all about us, but at heart, I've always been a tinker. I never went to art school or did visual. I loved HTML back in the early 2000s, but it was going to a crash course by Jacob Nielsen, the godfather of usability, even though lately he's gotten a little weird on LinkedIn. Weird. We spoke about this. That I really fell in love with usability and found out this was the tip of the iceberg of what is research, what is design, what is UX. So it's okay if you're not a perfect visual designer. There's room for everyone. And when Nathan and I started talking about tonight, it was, I think, over 6 months ago, even last year, a lot of meetups popped up talking about research, AI, the future. And tonight we wanted to take a slightly different tack. We wanted to go back to basics first. This is something Chris often speaks about. Everyone's worried about the future and talks about what is the future? Will our roles exist? Well, humans are not going to change tomorrow or even in the next few years or decades or hundreds of years. And some of those fundamental things will stay there. So we wanted to start tonight by initially asking you, and even if I don't know your name, I will pick on you, so put your hands up. What is design research, or if you prefer the term, UX research?
Anybody?
Peter's laughing, so I'm going to ask you, Pete. No, I'm just kidding. Yes.
So it can be as per your audience and the user who are going to use it, that is one, and the region. And
user and the region.
Anybody else?
Add on to that? Swear. Enough all the cokes and
For me, it goes back to when you're asking questions. It's about being curious and understanding what the person actually is able to do and what's standing in front of them of trying to achieve the task at hand. Obviously, there's multiple different angles to it. There's the empathy side, there's the functional side, but ultimately it's really understanding about what the human is trying to do and what's stopping them from doing it easily, doing it sufficiently, what's blocking them, what do they desire that's not there at the moment. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Betsy?
That's cheating. That is such cheating.
I'm curious. I'm really curious. Don't say visual design, all right?
Yeah, so for me, it's always been, when we're building digital products, understanding the people who are going to use those products and making it best it can be for those people. That's obviously very broad, but in its essence, it's just understanding the people who are going to use your product and making your product better for them.
What about kids? A few stops up. Sorry, kids, I was going to pick on you. You knew this coming.
Thank you. I think everyone said it in different ways, but it's the same thing. So you're designing for a human being, first and foremost, but research is very, very deep. There's multiple aspects to it. It's observations, data, It could be historic data, so it could just be observing how a product has evolved over time. But ultimately, it's making sure that a product is as human-centered as possible, but ultimately also ticking the boxes for the business as well. It's a balancing act. But in the ideal world, like design research is purely about how does the customer or the end user feel and use the product in the end.
Nice. Yeah, last one.
So from my point of view, when we speak about the user experience, we speak about empathy. That we listen carefully what they have mentioned, what they have said, while we are working on developing our research or our project that we are working on right now.
And now to our panelists. What is research?
Should I go? Okay, so for me, user research is the process in which we systematically and methodologically collect data, may that be qualitative or quantitative, in order to prove or disprove a research hypothesis, typically in relation to improving product service experience, right? Because our interpretation of user experience is so subjective. What I think is good user experience might not be what Jonathan thinks or Nathan thinks. So user experience research brings a layer of objectivity to an otherwise highly subjective experience, right? And
Love that.
whenever I talk to somebody new about user research, I always do this exercise where I ask them to describe how I would make tea. Tea. And people go ahead with their preconceived ideas, assumptions, etc. about how I would make my tea. And then I describe how I make my tea, and I guess it's weird, wonderful, I don't know, it's very idiosyncratic, right? And in that moment, you learn that our assumptions are not always right, and human beings are highly complex and contradictory and messy. So I guess user experience research that understands the messiness that we have as human beings.
Nathan.
I love the tea question. I've done similarly, but it's a morning routine, like shower, brush your teeth. Some people brush their teeth in the shower. Some people brush their teeth after the shower. It's fascinating to do
That's
that.
weird.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. No shame if you do that. No, I love the answers. I think there's so many ways to define user research. I think I would say user research or design research is engaging with humans that you're building for and translating what you learn into product decisions, to put it succinctly. And I think that the thing that differentiates maybe user research from other forms of discovery or a salesperson talking to a customer and translating that into a feature request is the sort of scientific methodology behind it. Not to say this ultra scientific in a lab sort of thing necessarily, but just understanding the basics of how to talk to people, how to reduce bias, how to collect data that is unbiased or that is valid with the appropriate level of rigor, and then translating that into product decisions.
Nice. I love both those answers, and everyone in the room as well. So tonight is not about pretending the industry has it figured out. I think we all agree, especially in the emerging market of the UAE, there's a long way to go, not just from terms of research, also in terms of design and every other discipline we have. But at the same time, research maturity is growing. Research operations, which we haven't got to yet, is becoming and has been a real discipline globally. I haven't met a single research operations person. Nathan says there is one in the UAE. We need to investigate that further. I believe it's a hypothesis.
I haven't met him, but...
And many researchers are asking bigger questions about their future role. So we're going to explore that as well. But before we do, put your hand up if you heard of the term research ops or research operations. What is research operations? Yes, we didn't have a time to chat earlier. I'm going to you.
So the way I've encountered it is a way to set up a system that enables you to do all the collection of your data. So whether you set up like a user pool, the tools that you how you use them, when you use what, and then being able to kind of create a system that enables efficiency but also efficacy, meaning you are collecting the data at the right point in time, the right sort of data, so that your results are valid, and you can replicate that over time. Depending, and so you can run different experiments according to that system that you set up.
Nice. It's a pretty good answer. It's going to be hard to top. Anyone else?
Back up to Batsy.
It's not visual design, but
You should just keep a mic up there for Betsy.
Yeah, so for me, I think you're totally right. And what I'll add on that is more of the emotional side. What I found what has helped us with design ops is it enables you to take the burden of systems from the people doing the research and allows them just to do the research. Right? So they don't have to worry about recruitment, tools, all the systems, all of that is taken care of by someone else and allows them just to be head down researchers. So that's the value I really find to it.
nice. Anyone else? Nathan, what is ResearchOps?
Great question. I would say ResearchOps is the infrastructure, whether that's tooling, processes, guardrails, that reduces the barriers to conducting research, helps research scale in terms of the amount being done as well as the impact, and then also maintains quality and ethics. So I think it's a sort of ever-evolving field, especially nowadays with the modern tooling. But I think it's something that exists whether or not you know it exists.
For me, research ops kind of I categorize it in two ways. One is a set of processes that allows us to evangelize research better. And secondly, is the process in which we can democratize research better. And what do I mean by that? Evangelization is having more buy-in into your research and making the impact spread further across the organization by having things like repositories, for instance, or having ways
What's a repository?
somewhere that you store all of your research, findings, data, everything in relation to your research. And when you have these kinds of tools, I guess, you're able to kind of make sure that your research is applicable across different areas of the business and connect the dots between other parts of the business. And when I talk about democratization, I mean having good standards when it comes to doing research, solid standards, so that whoever's doing the research, may it be a designer, may it be a junior researcher, there is already templates or best practices and all these things. You know, you're able to kind of lean on them to control the standard of research and make things go further.
So there are some that think, not me, of course, that research should only be done by researchers. Designers can't do research. Other people in the business can't do research. If they do bad or poorly executed research, then it's worse than not having it done at all. How do you counter that voice, which isn't on our panel tonight, so I'm going to pretend to be that person?
I mean, if you have good research ops in place, as I just said, you're able to control the standard of research, right? And there's a scale here. You have tactical research, which I think is quite easier to democratize, and you have the more strategic research, you know, the big ethnographies that you're doing, etc., where perhaps you do need more of that, you know, research or rigor. But if you're overseeing that process, you're upskilling your designers, for instance, to be able to run the research, you know, they're shadowing you doing moderation, for instance, you are training, essentially, people to do the research. And at the end of the day, we're not a sales department, right? We're not going to get the funding constantly to grow our team. But if we have enough requests of research coming in and we're able to maintain the standard, then that is a metric of success at the end of the day.
Yeah, totally agree. And it's not about perfection. I think people also focus on perfection. It's about minimizing the risk of delivering something that's not valuable.
And also, you'll be involved, right, as an experienced researcher in things like data synthesis. You perhaps are shadowing moderation, so you're there, you're present, you know, you're able to quality control.
Great. So as we've said, it's the practice of creating the environment, and we'll talk about what that means in a second, and the environments that Nathan and Shazmin have set up, the systems, operations that make research sustainable. There is a lady, forget where she's from, she might be South African, called Kate Townsey, who's like the godmother, you could call her, of ResearchOps. She created a community back in 2017, 18, and they ran global workshops that were the exact same workshops with a few volunteers. And I was lucky to attend the first one in 2018 in Melbourne. And then a year later in 2019, I was the facilitator in Perth. I did want to run one in 2020 in Dubai, but the pandemic unfortunately hit. I did speak to a few researchers like Tanya at the time. Anyway, she's written a book. She recently left Atlassian. She built a research operations department. Research operations is a job. It's a role. They're not doing research. We don't have them in Dubai. Maybe there's kind of one that Nathan might have met. But you need a large enough, often, company. Mike just died. I might have pressed the thing. Is Jasmine still here? And we might need some batteries, otherwise sharing one mic's going to be tough, unless I turned it off by mistake. So, as we've said, just to be clear, so we're on the same basis, it's the person that is just there to make sure that the researchers, like Patsy said, can do a great job, and they don't need to worry about, hang on, I need to recruit some more people to do usability testing next week. There is someone calling your customers or getting the website to feed in potential customers. So every week somebody comes in and you don't need to worry about all that logistics. There's someone that's doing your tooling, your software. And there's a great handbook. I've got a copy of it here if you want to check it out, if you want to do that yourself. So definitely have a look. So it starts with that right environment, creating the right culture, the workflows, the support systems. So research can happen consistently and effectively. When you, Nathan, go into an organization, is that something that you look for, that you interrogate? Can you tell us an example of when you've done that? And what was that environment like when you joined? And then what did you create when you were there?
Another book shout out actually is a book called Building the Research Engine, which just dropped a couple weeks ago by a guy named Julian. And he covers this really well. And he talks about 3 levels of sort of research maturity at a company, being culture, infrastructure, and communication. So culture is that sort of like the buy-in to research that hasn't been evangelized to people. How are people making product decisions today and design decisions today? The infrastructure, which are what are those tools that exist to get us in front of users to reliably capture and document data to make sure what we find is reusable in the future and doesn't just sort of sit in a Google Drive folder somewhere for years and years. And then communication. So how is research being shared? Who is engaging with it? And I think at every company, there are different stages on each of those levels that the sort of research maturity is at. And so part of your job as a researcher is, as you're coming in, is to start to assess and gauge what level are we at in each of those sort of those pillars of research maturity. And the most important thing is that you have to meet those organizations where they're at, and you can't really jump the gun. I'm not going to take your talking point because I think it's a great one about the quantitative, but Shaz has a really great example of that. Understand how product decisions are made today. Understand how people are engaging with users and customers today. Understand how people are consuming research findings or insights and using those to inform decisions. And find where you can sort of up-level in any of those categories and choose your battles wisely and find your allies is the biggest one, especially at places that are not very mature. Find that product manager, that designer who are really hungry for research. Work with the teams who are engaging with what you find from the research to make decisions. And honestly, just don't work with the teams as much as you can who are just ignoring research because it's a waste of time.
So we're going to skip to the next because we've got 6 areas of ResearchOps. The next one's people. Can you tell us a little bit about how you've helped researchers to grow the team, create those standards you were talking about earlier, roles, career paths, some of the design capability standard Chris and I were talking about?
Yeah, that's a really good point. One, I guess, experience that comes to me is when I was working at EPAM in London. We had a lot of UX researchers in the team. There was about 20 of us, actually. And we all came from like really different pathways. I was, psychology, neuroscience. Some people coming from all kind of, economical type research. And what I did was actually facilitate a monthly get-together where we just talked about methods, because people felt a bit apprehensive, like working with qualitative methods when they've worked primarily with quantitative methods, because there's no traditional path in how we become user researchers either, right? So I'm not always comfortable with all the different methodologies. I actually called this session Methods and Shit, so that we can talk about the methodologies and talk about it in a really kind of candid way. And this does help to kind of upskill, because you're talking about complex things in a really kind of light-hearted, easy way. And it means that people are not feeling too scared about using different types of methodologies, because we don't all know every single type of methodology either.
Nice. Nathan, can you tell us a bit about org context? So how you embed research into the organization. It could be a product organization where you're building products, you're setting strategy, decision making, or not. It could be a different, a consultancy or government, or I think mostly you've worked in startups, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, mostly
a little bit of
products
consultancy.
in-house, yeah.
I think I'm more interested in the product organization.
Sure.
So how have you embedded research and then looked at how you could scale and operationalize that?
Yeah. So I think Shaz touched on a bit of it in the sort of democratization lens. But the big thing in embedding research is understanding that research is like a muscle. And every organization I've joined, even designers who are very senior designers, the common thread is they find it difficult to do research. Design is a full-time job, PM is a full-time job. They don't have time to go and do the ops side and do the recruiting and do all this stuff to unlock research for them. And no one has ResearchOps, even at established orgs. So your job is to help them build that muscle. And part of that democratization is stop gatekeeping research. The people are going to engage with customers with or without you, so don't fight it. Try to level up the validity of the data that we're getting and the validity of the decisions we're making off the back of those customer engagements. And so I think when it comes to embedding research, it's understanding how the current product and design process works. How can research fit into that in a lightweight way? And then again, who are your allies who are willing to jump into a session, facilitate a session? Who are the people who are actively taking notes when you're interviewing researchers? Who are the people who are actively pinging you on Slack or Google Chat and saying, hey, I have this design decision to make. What do we know about this sort of researcher? You have to start with those small wins, build those allies, and then show by example. So essentially you can come as your team, come with your product team. You've been working with them for 2 months. You've made some great decisions based on some awesome research that you've done together. And you can showcase, this was our process. Look at how we made decisions along the way. You will be light years ahead of other product teams who are not engaging with researchers when you do that. And you advocate for that. And leaders will say, okay, we want more of that. How do we get more of that? Who else can replicate this?
So just sticking with you for a second, Nathan. In an agile process, it's really hard, especially Dubai, but everywhere. Developers are busy delivering. The business sees value as output. Design is having a hard time keeping up with development, and research is missed the train.
Yep.
Designers are kind of catching the train. How do you embed research in that environment?
So I think this is actually where the democratization becomes really important, because that more tactile, evaluative research, usability testing, concept testing, the things that you can actually get value from just talking with 2 or 3 users quickly in a continuous discovery sort of practice, unlocking that actually gives space for researchers to do the more strategic things, to spot opportunities across products and say, actually, there's something unique that we're finding that exists across these 4 different product platforms or suites or product pillars, and sort of advocating for investigating into that. And so that's where democratization is so important, because I think old school user research was really a lot of times a usability house, which was decisions have been made, we've designed something, how do we make it more usable, how do we test it with users? And the next evolution of that, or maybe a couple hops past that, is how does user research get into the conversations, the seat at the table with the leadership decisions, with the product strategy decisions, with the business strategy decisions. And there's an opportunity for that if we set up the process and the tools to unlock other people to conduct the easier to do evaluative research.
Nice. We're going to go on to governance, which we'll probably get to also at the very end. One of the dangers, the risks of AI. How do we ensure that what we're doing is ethical, it's secure, compliant, and done in a responsible way? Shazmin?
Yes. Again, this is where research ops is really, really important in defining what the flows are in which we do research, making sure like all researchers are informed on what informed consent means, for instance, like participants have the right to withdraw from a research study, for instance. And I guess for me, coming from a clinical background, ethics is a massive part kind of driving the research, right? So yeah, you have to define those processes, make sure that all researchers are, kind of well aware of the processes and making sure that these are being followed, right? And also data storage, all these sorts of things. There has to be SOPs in place, protocols in place in order to make sure that everyone knows, right, what the processes are.
I have a question for you, Shaz. Have you ever worked at a place that has got this down to a T, or is there always sort of a...
Not in kind of the corporate world, no. But certainly most of my experiences have been in the healthcare sector. And there are already existing strict protocols in place around everything. So yeah, when I was working in more kind of healthcare startups, this was a big thing.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Australia, when I was a researcher at an accounting software company, I don't think it was only the compliance and the government issues, it was just the maturity of design and research meant that research was deleted after a certain amount of time, that it was anonymized properly, that it was secure, that it was on certain systems and not others. Whereas, I don't know why, maybe sometimes it's the environment, like maybe banking is more regulated, but here I haven't seen as much rigor in that respect. Have you found the same? Like US compared to here, or
yeah,
does it depend on the industry?
I've never been on the sort of the heavily regulated industry side, which have those sort of built in. So from my experience on the product side, there's always holes in it, and you try your best and you try to have the checklist, but there's always something that slips through the cracks, or someone is conducting research using a template and not doing the right things, and they show up 3 months later and like, look what we did. Where'd you store your data? What did you use to? There's always going to be issues with that, unfortunately.
So the next one is really interesting. I think when I got into ResearchOps, we had a team of 42 designers. 4 of them were pure visual designers, design system. Betsy would have loved them. I was the first researcher, and I hired 2. And the rest were kind of end-to-end product designers. Some wore the service design hat. And instead of revolutionizing the world, we said, let's interview them and ask, how do you do design from beginning to end? Most of them did do research. It wasn't like a UX, UI style environment. And what we got to, in terms of the biggest pain point that we decided to focus on, was recruitment, but also knowledge management. And we were obsessed with a repository. It was around the time Dovetail, which is proudly Australian software company, came on the scene. We were using Airtable, Evernote, but the idea, and there were some amazing people out there that used different software, now a lot has come up, was to create a repository, as Shazmin was saying. Some sort of a data management piece where not just the designers and the researchers, but the whole organization uses to understand the level of insight. Every organization I've been in, it's been a struggle. Now even more so. Where is the research? Where is data? Who has access? Are they even aware that they should ask that question, or do they jump to conclusions? Have you found this as a challenge? Have you seen it working well anywhere? Who wants to take it first?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges. I mean, I think to your point, recruiting people and then making research useful on the back end are probably two of the most common pain points for researchers everywhere. I think there's different levels to repositories that you can have. One level of repository is just, here's what we've done. This is the type of research, the type of users we talk to. You can dig in and go learn yourself. And that's great. You need to have that as sort of a baseline. And then you have to start building on top of that to eventually getting to a sort of maybe insights repository, which I find are very, very difficult to do, even with the out-of-box tools like dovetails and stuff. It's difficult to do, and then it's also difficult to get people to use. Even if they say they want to use it, they don't use it. Fortunately, I think there are more opportunities now in the AI age to go and build something custom built for your organization today. So there's a lot of potential there. I think it's really exciting, actually, one of the more exciting use cases for AI in research. But I think this is something that I've never met a researcher who does this perfectly. Or maybe they say so on stage and you ask them behind the stage and they'll say, oh, actually, we have some work to do there. So I think it's a really tough challenge.
Shazmin, you spoke earlier a lot about evangelizing. I agree with you. I think that's one of the challenges that a lot of researchers don't love being in front of the stage or talking. They love doing the research out in the field. And when you ask them to come on stage, not looking at you, Tanya, they really dislike the public speaking side, even though they are amazing, they've done amazing research. Have you found somewhere where you've been able to do this and not just the circle around you, like say product managers or your immediate circle or, I don't know, executive, like people are actually quoting your research or using it? Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, I think more recently, I've kind of set about like understanding the stakeholders that you're doing research for, and then tailoring how you deliver those insights. Because previously, there was always a kind of a notion that you have to produce a report, a lengthy report, and no one cares about the report. You are the only person that reads that report. And now, sometimes my findings are just emails. Yes, this is a good idea. This is what the data says. Or I'll work with a designer to put something, really quick together. So I think this knowledge management is also knowing how to deliver your knowledge. I've seen recently around watch parties, for instance, and that being a good way to deliver insights in which you get your stakeholders to literally watch the findings and watch quotes and watch people interact with the prototype or whatever it is that you've done in usability testing. So yeah, I think having creative ways of kind of delivering the message is also really, really important.
Not even, I hate to say this, but not even researchers like to read the research reports of other researchers. They're the most boring things in the world. I think the decisions are what matter, and so communicating what decisions are made off the back of research. You have to document stuff because you want it to be reusable in the future, but spending so much time, 2 weeks on a slide deck or something, I just hope those days are gone, and I think we're moving past them.
I do want to double down on that because Chris always reminds me and says, what are people taking away from it? So sorry if I'm stealing the thunder. But if those of you don't know what a watch party is, it's basically getting your team, your executives, anybody else that's you've invited and might not be there to observe you talking to a customer or somebody in your team, to observe a usability test. Again, going back to that same company, MYOB in Australia, there was a new GM of product and people were a bit scared. I, in his first week, invited him to observe an interview, and he told me this was the best hour of my last month. Just listening to a customer, and I invited him to more because the risk as well is that they only come to one, and they think that the whole world is like this one data point. I don't know if you've had that experience.
Yeah.
But moving on to our last one, I don't know who we were up to. I lost track between the two of you. Our last area category within ResearchOps is tools and infrastructure. We've bled a few of them in, but providing that platform, systems, operating tooling needed to run and scale research efficiently. And again, like we said, this is where we focus on with ResearchOps. Can you tell us, I think Shazmin, I think we were up to you this time, where you've come in maybe at your recent organization in the recent industry. What was the environment like, and what did you set up in terms of tooling and infrastructure? Was it already there? Was it legacy? Did you have to get buy-in? And what did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was quite lucky, thank you, Betsy, that I came in and they already had awesome tooling. Dovetail was there, user testing, we had user queue. Seriously.
I don't believe it.
Seriously, I was very lucky.
How much did Betsy pay you to say this?
I swear. So I didn't do much in terms of the tooling because I think I've got very good tooling, luckily, as a user researcher. So it's all about kind of defining when to use that tooling, right? And in what cases are we using user testing and using a sample from the US or the UK, or when are we having to use samples from the UAE, for instance? These are the processes that I defined. But yeah, I was very lucky.
And custom tools with AI?
Yes, that too.
Okay, Nathan, anything you wanted to add on tooling and infrastructure?
I guess you just have to meet organizations where they're at, because sometimes it's you have no budget and you have to do something scrappy. Sometimes you inherit a great tooling suite. You just sort of have to gauge it when you get there. But do what you can to get the fundamentals down, the basics. Make sure you're tracking who you're talking to, how much you're paying them, where they're from. Make sure you have the sort of the ethics covered in terms of NDAs, in terms of getting approvals for recording, in terms of data laws, all that sort of thing. But yep.
So we're going to go on now. Those were the 6 categories of research operations that, as you can see, they do bleed into research. But it's important, if you are doing research, even if you don't have a research operations person, that you think about those other designers, those other researchers, other product people who are also going to be doing this. What do they need? As we've said, if you've spoken to this group of customers about this topic, it could be a large organization. Let's not hit them up again and speak about something very similar. When should we merge research or not merge it? And it leads nicely to our next topic around the current challenges of the industry. We can talk about AI, we're going to talk about it later anyway. But as a researcher in the UAE, can you tell us what are some of your biggest challenges? Nathan?
I think this challenge is not just facing research right now. I think it's facing designers and developers and everyone. But now with tools, anyone can do research, anyone can do design, anyone can be an engineer, anyone can vibe code something, anyone can create a vibe coded interface on Cursor. The problem that's unique to research, I think, is that there's this great article by a researcher who works for Reddit named Carl Pearson. And he writes about how bad research doesn't stink. It's really easy to present research, bad research, and it looks good. The numbers are good, there's percentages that are nice, you have a quote from users. It's tough to have the expertise to dig into that and say, this is actually completely invalid or misleading or you're cherry picking. I think that with design and engineering, it's a lot easier to tell when your entire site goes down because you haven't done proper DevOps or monitoring. It's really easy to tell when a design just kind of sucks or looks the same as every other design. So research has a unique challenge in that respect, in that we sort of have to defend the validity of research in a world where everyone can do research. But I don't think it's unique to research, the fact that roles are blending and people are putting on multiple hats and trying their hand at different disciplines.
Shazmin?
Yes. So in terms of local challenges, one thing that sticks out to me in my kind of 2 years that I've been here is we are obsessed in this country with feature parity, in that if somebody else is doing something shiny and new, the organization will do everything to make sure that they're either beating that person or showing that they're taking steps to achieve some sort of parity. And sometimes research can become like downward validation because of that, because you're having to validate some person's assumption around doing that. So it doesn't become actual research, but just you are supporting that person's decision, right? So that's something that you have to challenge quite a lot in this region. What else? Yeah.
Can I ask you about, One of the challenges I had, I worked for 2.5 years at Property Finder, where the numbers were insane, like in terms of the traffic, who's your customer. It wasn't only B2C, I was also looking after B2B. We were selling software as well. And it becomes very challenging to prioritize your customer. So I know you mentioned your focus could be on local Emiratis, but they're not your only customer. How do you balance that priority around research, and what if some of the findings compete with each other? Like what's right for high wealth Emirati is not right for other customers. Can you talk a little bit about that? Which is a particular, I think, challenge of the region.
Yes, I think it's all about kind of defining your research goals as well. Like, what is it that you're actually investigating? Like, who are your target population? Having the right kind of sampling as well, making sure that you aren't just focusing on the high net worth, individuals that we've spoken about, and making sure there is a diverse sample that represents, everyone that's using your products or services. This is, I think, a research kind of definition issue that you also kind of learn how to do with time as well.
Okay. And Nathan, can you tell us a little bit about a recent project you worked on where you said the actual organization had a very fine idea of who the customer was, and research ended up telling a different story?
Yeah, I think this is one of the dangers everywhere, but particularly with this region, is this sort of assumption-based decision-making, especially when you hire a bunch of expats from elsewhere, guilty, to come and design for populations of, a very diverse population. When I was working for a design agency, working for the NEOM project, there was a bunch of expats in a room designing a national park for a local Saudi audience in a sort of a smallish city in northeastern Saudi Arabia. And they came in with a bunch of assumptions, right? People had built a national park in South Africa before, or in Australia before, or in New Zealand, and they came over going, okay, this is what worked here. So here's what we're going to build in the visitor center. We need this big experiential thing, and here's what we're going to build. We're going to build a yoga studio in the desert. We're going to do this, and we're building for high net worth individuals because yada yada. And at this point, there was no even census data for this city in Saudi Arabia. So they didn't know what the local population were going to be able to afford, or what they expected to pay, or what they expected from a trip to a national park that's 40 minutes from their backyard. And so just working with these folks to understand what their assumptions are and what decisions they have upcoming, and then engaging with the local population to actually understand what's the reality out there. And the reality was completely different than what a bunch of people sitting in a room were expecting of a local population who they've literally never spoken to. The most stark example I can talk to is they were building a visitor center out in the desert for this population of a town that I think is like 97% Muslim. And they were saying, oh, we don't need to build a prayer room because I've seen people praying on the side of the road. So that's sufficient. And this is the level of, I guess, the danger of building based off assumptions, or building for yourself, saying, oh, I want a yoga studio in the desert. That sounds great. Well, yeah, yoga's not exactly halal. There's not going to be a lot of Muslims from the local population coming out to do yoga in the desert. So I think that, especially in this region where you have such a diverse place, there's so many nuances to understand, and having the humility to say, okay, I'm not designing for myself. I don't know everything. How can I learn about people? Is just so important.
I want to change direction a little bit. We've spoken a lot about research ops, and I think it's something as designers, even in design ops, as Betsy mentioned, we love the process. We fall in love with the process and we dig into the process, but that's not delivering value. So how do you measure the value? Is that a challenge? Are you measuring value? How do you hold yourself accountable? Shazmin?
I think it is a challenge to measure value, and I am trying to kind of bake research into kind of KPIs, analytics, to see whether if we know there's an issue with something, we do the research, make some changes, does that impact analytics, for instance, drop-off rates? Does it improve that metric? Because then I think you get into a really lovely cycle of research impact, right? That you can talk to your stakeholders at length. And this is something that I'm working on at the moment, but it's not easy if you don't have any analytics.
Yeah.
And then it's a little bit more difficult to kind of justify. But it's something that is difficult and something that I'm trying to navigate myself right now.
Nathan?
I think it's also difficult because research is a couple layers abstracted from the actual profit that's made from a product, right? So a designer is one step closer, an engineer is one step closer. They can, I developed this feature in this product that generated this much revenue. But then a researcher can say, well, I can talk to some users and translated that to needs, and then 6 months later we built something that was kind of not what I suggested, and then we made this much money. Like, it seems whenever I read this on a CV, I always have I don't know about you guys, but a little question mark pop up going, did you really generate 20 million in revenue from these 12 interviews you did? And so I think another way that I try to track impact of research is working with my product partners to understand what are the design decisions that were influenced. How many design changes or UX improvements did we make? How many roadmaps were changed? Was there anything in terms of maybe from your research you identified this really big unmet need for this cross-product workflow? Was a team created? Was an org change initiated because of your research? So I think there's ways that you can work in that abstract to show how you've influenced an organization or a product, even if it's not necessarily tied to a dollar. The other thing is time saved and money saved. So if you said don't build a feature and they didn't build it, go estimate how long that would have taken. We saved 500,000 dirhams in development and design efforts by deprioritizing a feature. Is a great way to do it as well.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, but you said it. So when I joined Property Finder in 2019, there were 3 designers, 0 researchers, and they were building a chat. And I was like, okay, but we're not a chat communication company. How are we going to compete with WhatsApp? How are we going to compete with existing systems? So I said, fine, one of the designers can continue to build this thing. I'm going to take the other designer to ask, not do you need a chat, but how do you communicate? And we were able to push back the delivery to say, let's do an alpha with a small number of practices and understand this better. And it was a horrible feature. It was a very weak chat, and 1 million dirham was wasted on that. Mm-hmm. Now, it could have been 10 more, because the challenge that we often have as researchers is no one stops to measure how much this bad product cost us. They just roll on or roll it back, but no one says, oh, developers, you wasted us 10 million, or CTO or whatever.
Which is ironic because people often push back on research saying, oh, it costs a lot of money to do research, but they never talk about the cost of building the wrong thing, which is 100 times more expensive.
The cost of not doing research.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're going to keep moving right along to AI opportunities. There was a great conference just recently, happy to share the link with everyone. A researcher that I worked with in Australia, she was just starting her career. Amazing to see her at the top of the field, really. She's running a large research team. They're doing a lot of research with AI embedded in their team. So they've got synth personas based on real interviews. It's not used to make super critical decisions, but it is used to make some decisions in the exploration and earlier part of this research process, let's say. And it was super interesting to hear, well, you've got, some maybe more older school researchers saying, I'm not that comfortable doing that, but she's, young, talented, really pushing the boundaries of this. I don't know how much of this gets done or not in the UAE. I think it's a very interesting topic. I don't think we can just say it's AI, it's wrong. But on the other hand, what are the risks of doing that? What are the pros and cons? Shazmin, you look like you want to take this first.
My psychology brain really kind of lights up when it comes to using things like synthetic data, AI moderated interviews, all this sort of stuff. At the end of the day, the current state of the technology is that it does not act or behave like a human being, right? And there's certain, I guess, psychological, social characteristics that we have that make us human. For instance, theory of mind. The fact that I know as a human that Nathan, as another human, has a completely different experience to me. AI right now does not have that capability. It's wildly consistent in its answers about things, whereas, as we know as researchers, human beings are far from consistent. They are contradictory, all of the above. So when you are kind of using these kinds of things, you are getting an approximation of your target population. That isn't what we're striving for as researchers. We want to understand the nuances. And one other thing that you're not capturing is the say-do gap. That's huge in research, because as human beings, we say one thing and do another thing, and AI is not there yet. So these are my kind of, two major aspects.
And what if you took your repository that Betsy paid for, thank you, Betsy, and all of these interviews, and you loaded all of that up, and you, again, didn't make massive million or billion-dollar decisions, but you used to tell the story of your customers? Can you see anything that's, like, would you do that? Or are you just like a blank no? This is good, finally we're disagreeing on something.
I think there's value in that, right? I'm not saying there isn't value. If I was the system architect in defining what is synthetic data within my research practice, right? I think our roles will evolve inevitably in that way, I think, going forward, right? So I think there is value on that, but it's also based on what we know, what we've collected. So yeah, fine, that could work in some scenarios, but if I'm doing a complete new discovery on a complete new feature, I need to go talk to some humans. I have to go and speak and understand how something lands. So I think, yeah, there is value to it, but it depends on the risk and the novelty of the research that's needed.
Nathan?
Yeah, I think
Where do you sit on this?
I think we're still figuring it out. I'm open to it. I've tried similar things. I think there are risks to it, and I think one of the risks is the sort of human risk and the lack of the loss of collaboration that can happen with something like this. I think in my experience as a researcher, some of the best moments or most impactful opportunities are when someone messages you or stops by your desk and says, hey, what do we know about X? Or what do we know about this customer segment? Because it opens the opportunity for a conversation to go, oh, why are you asking that question? What are you hoping to, what decision are you trying to make based on my answer to that question? And that unlocks these opportunities to work with a new ally, a new product partner, to uncover a new research opportunity. I think we lose some of that when people default to a chatbot based on transcript data. I also think there's bad ways to do it. If you're just uploading transcripts and then saying, here's a AI synthetic persona that's an amalgamation of these 8 different people that we talked to, I'm not sure that's the best way to do it. Maybe there's other ways that I'd be more open to. But I'm very open to the idea of using AI in user research, in making insights more accessible, in the repository problem. I think one of the big opportunities is, as everyone starts to do more research, how can we use AI to help people get from the sort of 60% complete study plan and interview guide to like the 90% ready? So by the time it lands on a researcher's desk to review, there's really only a couple little scribbles and notes to make, and then you're good to go. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, but the human loss, I think, is the big loss with AI in almost every single use case that we can talk about.
I think that's really nice because, yes, AI in terms of helping you to do stuff is amazing. It's like the best possible research assistant you could possibly get. Yeah, like you said, around the more human parts of it, the human touch points, I don't think it's there yet.
I also think that's just the best part of the workday also, is when you're working with a designer, a product manager, an engineer, and you're collaborating together. And if I have to do that with Claude all the time, I think I'm going to go crazy.
What are those human parts that AI should not replace in the research process?
The 2 aspects that are coming to my mind are, synthetic data and AI kind of moderated interviews. This is where kind of alarm bells go ringing for me. And right now, sort of LLMs are, they're based on reinforcement learning, right? So they're based on telling you or giving you an answer that you want to hear. I think I read a paper the other day that not many LLMs tell you that you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
it's quite tricky if you're a researcher. So yeah, these parts of the process I'm not too keen on, but yeah.
Nathan?
I
What
agree.
parts should not ever be replaced by AI?
I think.
And maybe you've seen some people trying to do that, and you're like, "Ooh, don't do that."
Yeah, no, I agree with the human to human aspect of speaking with your customers. There's something unique that happens when you've been face to face with your customers regularly for a long time, that you start to just understand them sort of like intrinsically. And your role as a researcher on a team becomes not this sort of, hey, can I find this quote about something here? But you become more of a consultant. You become the person who's closest to the user. And I'm concerned that when we use AI to read through the transcripts and analyze them and spit out, findings and summaries, we're losing some of that. When someone asks me a question, I can think of 7 quotes that are relevant to that question from these 3 different users, and I can tell you about this user and why, and I can tell you about their background and maybe where I think that sort of influence came from. And I think you lose so much of that with AI, especially when you sort of just have AI data collection and then AI synthesis and then AI reporting and the loss of the human touch. I think we're going to feel it in a big way in the products that we're using today and that we're going to be using in a couple months and years.
I think the analysis part is a really important part as well. Because I know we are using AI to run our analysis for us, but I don't think, remember the days when you'd have loads of qualitative data and you'd spend days.
Post-its. Where's
going through the
Post-it man?
And how your analysis would change day by day as well, depending on how much you've kind of been obsessing over this thing. AI could never, it's a fixed kind of output. It doesn't kind of mature like the way our brains take in the information, depending on the context and all these things.
I really missed that. There was something, I was, even back in, 2018, 19, when I had that researcher as a title, and I was discussing with another researcher, how do we present this to leadership? And yes, you can do a deck, but there's a feeling about having your war room full of Post-its where you are walking them through the research. And that quote, and it's more than the quote, it's you experiencing the cat jumped on, the other researcher while they're talking. That whole really being in the research, surrounded by it, is very different to AI or a slide deck. Do you agree?
Yeah, 100%. And what you also lose is the ability to continue to do research yourself. You lose your muscle atrophies, right? If research is a muscle, and okay, so let's say you're getting ready for, you got your beach body ready for the summer, so you're starting to head to the gym and do a lot of workouts. You wouldn't send a robot in your place to go work out at the gym for you, and then Sharpie on some abs and show up at the beach. It's not going to work. But you might use maybe an exoskeleton that helps you with your posture, helps you lift a bit more, helps you with your form. I think that's a great analogy for how to use AI with research, and also the dangers of AI completely replacing the sort of human element of research. There's this really great researcher, Nikki Anderson, who I recommend you follow. And she recently posted about how she has made a rule for herself that every 3rd study she does completely manually, because she does not want to lose that ability to do the manual process. And I think that's going to be a huge differentiator in 3 or 4 or 5 years as a researcher, to go, no, I actually can do this. Maybe you're going to work at an org that doesn't allow you to use AI tools or AI analysis, or maybe you don't have the right data for it. Maybe you're working these limitations, these restraints. And I've also never seen just AI come out with something truly insightful, where you're connecting this quantitative piece from product analytics and connecting that with something someone said, and connecting that with this observation that you saw when you went to someone's workplace. I've never seen AI do that in a way that makes people go, oh, wow, that was crazy. Wow, we totally learned something. Let's shift everything. I've never seen that.
Interesting. We're going to move on now to the future of design research. Where, you've been speaking about it, one of the challenges recently I had is, how do you mentor, how do you teach the manual way to a generation that isn't interested in the manual way, that just wants to use AI and says, you've just built a beautiful agent for the whole organization. Why shouldn't I use the agent that we've built? Why should I do it the manual way? So what is the future of research, and how do we keep some of these fundamentals? Nathan, you want to go first, or Shazmin?
One thing that gives me hope, I was talking with my wife about this on the way over here, is Gen Z hates AI. The young people hate AI. They don't want to use AI and work. They don't want to use AI products. And maybe there's a world in 5 or 10 years where they just flat out say no and they stop using it as much. So it gives me a little bit of hope. I'm not anti-AI.
You have to share me this research.
I will happily do that. But the future, I think, is sort of research, and I think the trend was already heading there pre-AI, and now it's just accelerated and maybe become more of an urgent matter, is research as sort of a center of excellence that enables high quality, efficient, effective research to be done across an organization, and then researchers are sort of unlocked for the more strategic impact, to connect the truly insightful dots across products that you can't just point an LLM at.
Shazmin, where are we going?
Kind of tying back into AI, I think UX researchers have got such a huge place in making sure that the future of human AI experiences are ones that kind of promote agency, promote transparency, and we have better human AI experiences. And the reason why I say that, and this is, of course, is a really kind of nice way in which our field is changing, that we can be part of the future of shaping that, is that at the moment, are we making informed choices when we use AI? Nathan mentioned around kind of the atrophy that we have. But we also have cognitive atrophy when we use AI. Whenever we delegate tasks to AI on our behalf, our brains do not fire as much. Those parts of the brains that are involved in doing those tasks do not fire. Well, what's the long-term impact of that? As a psychologist, that's a question that I have. So as researchers, as advocates of users, as advocates of the human experience, we've got a role to play in conducting research that promotes informed choices when it comes to AI experiences. So I'm really, really excited about that future. And kind of expanding on that, we're moving away from usability when it comes to human AI experiences. So more about kind of, as I said, transparency, trust, all these sorts of things. And emotion research becomes really interesting here. Looking at moments of hesitation, frustration, confusion. And this is where biometric research really comes in. And this is a kind of method that I've been working on quite a lot recently, and which is why Facely came about. In that, even by looking at facial expressions, we can understand moments of confusion, hesitation, etc., objectively, not subjectively. And these are micro-expressions, and that they're unconscious, for instance. So how can we leverage this kind of data when we're interacting with AI to create more transparent experiences? So I think the future is evolving in terms of methods as well.
Nice. Nathan, any other thoughts on the role? I mean, this also blends into the role of a designer changing, right? So do you see a risk in that change? And like, describe what that looks like, like what is a day in the life of a researcher in this center of excellence of yours?
Yeah. Well, I think that all the roles are changing, right? And you see a sort of center of excellence happening in development orgs as well, where they're encouraging PMs or designers to ship code, but they say, here's how we document it, use these sort of predefined skills. It's going to go through these quality assurance checks. Maybe it's never going to see the light of day because the code sucks, but there's at least these sort of checks in place. And these roles and these hats are completely blending. I think that's going to happen for so many roles, if not all of them. And for research, what that means is I'm a strong believer that as a researcher, you should have strong opinions about the product and about the design. It's not enough to just say, here's what we heard, here's what we observed. You should come into it with an opinion and work with your product stakeholders to share why you have that opinion. Here's what we should do about what we observed and what we learned. And I think now it's easier than ever, if you weren't already before, to just whip up a prototype or to whip up something that can showcase and visualize your opinion based on what you have learned from the users you've been speaking to.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's something Chris and I have recently come up to, and the researchers sometimes say, well, that's not my job. The so what of the research is not my job. I do the research. I don't know. It's not. But I disagree with that. And just like you did a little plug there, I think that's what HCD Pro is about. It's pushing the boundaries of what we think is and isn't our role. Shazmin, how far do you want your researchers to go? Do you think they should be doing prototypes, even though it's not necessarily their skill set?
I think we have.
Or will Betsy like just, you're out?
I think we need to evolve, right, in many different ways. If that means prototyping, leveraging AI to paint the story. Storytelling is a really important part of how AI is going to, revolutionize the way that we deliver our insights. And if that means that you can leverage AI to create a prototype to tell your story better, that's still being quite human, right?
Yeah,
So
love that.
yeah, I think we're always going through evolutions, and if that's the part of it, that's the part of it. And the other thing I said was around, again, like being system architects, helping to create these kind of synthetic data sources that we're using, or define how we are using AI in that way. And the other thing I think that's changing is actually the strategic influence that UX research has. I read a recent report by Maze, and they interviewed 500 researchers, and they asked in 2025 how much their research was shaping strategic and business decisions across the organization. In 2025, that number was 8%.
Wow.
In 2026, that number is now over 25%. In that, researchers believe that they are shaping strategic and business decisions across the organization. So whatever we need to get there, that's what we need to do, right? And I think it's exciting the way that it's developing.
Maze is awesome software. You should check it out, by the way. Do you use that? Does Betsy give you license that one? Not yet.
Maze is not as good as user testing.
Okay. But it's pretty good if you can't afford user testing and you're not as rich as Betsy. One final question that Chris wanted to ask everyone. I'm just going to invite him up here.
You said no curveballs, Chris.
Can I take a mic?
It's a research answer.
Yes, this is a research dance off. So we're going to mix it up a little bit here. I'll be the judge. But I looked
Get the
for Nathan
strobe light.
earlier and asked this lovely lady, she got, are your slides ready? She's like, I need to. Very cool. I had one final question, but I had two thoughts actually just listening.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm not a researcher, I'm a designer. I'm a creative director through all the classic traditional design things.
Hey, we're designers too, man.
I know you are. But I'm that kind of other side of it, that maybe isn't represented as much as in this meetup, but hanging around with this guy for too many years, and also my time before that, being tried to be pushed into a service designer, I had to get in the weeds and do some research. And so what Nathan was saying, and also yourself, was you miss that kind of intuitiveness of being in front of a human being when you're asking them a question. And AI might get it one day, but they're far away, that you might answer me and say, yeah, I love that product. No, they didn't. It's like you can tell as a human they meant something else by that, and you can dig deeper at that moment, which is one of the most important things, is keep asking why until you get that solution. And the AI is not going to notice that. You go, next, move on. They loved it. 10 out of 10. They didn't mean that. But also one of the observations as well, which you talked about, and this is what we're having a lot of success at the Early Childhood Authority, is using storytelling to really bring that research and insights to life, which, another shameless plug, is something we're going to hopefully be doing a lot of with HCD Pro and helping people to do that better. So the
Final question
is not for you guys, because I think this has gone on. We're going to have networking, so feel free to go and talk to our panel and ask questions. My question is for both of you two: is for the audience, what's that one piece of valuable information on research or research ops or anything that we talked about today that you would give to the audience to take with them? They only remember one thing, because we've gone through so much stuff. What's that one thing that you would want the audience to take with them? You first, Ian.
Shaz touched on it earlier, and I was sort of itching because it's one of my pet peeves. I agree with you, not something you said that I have a pet peeve with.
Come on, you said before you would disagree tonight, guys. You've agreed on everything.
I think Maze is better than user testing. That's our disagreement.
Try recruiting from them. We'll see.
Yeah, the recruiting
In
is terrible.
UAE.
Okay, I think the one thing that I would love for people to take away is what Shaz has touched on about validation. And the mistake I see is a sort of research theater or this UX theater, and I think it's prevalent now more than ever, especially with tools like user testing and Maze, is validation as your sort of checkbox done. I think that any study that has the goal of validate in the sort of research goals is already set off on the wrong foot. Your goal should never be to validate a decision that was made or a design that you've made. Your goal should be to evaluate it. And validation is maybe one of the outcomes of that research, but equally valid, sometimes even more valuable, is invalidating it and saying we should not build this or we were wrong about this. And I think that's the thing we miss, especially, and it really irks me when the sort of, oh, we're doing more research, we have unmoderated testing tools, designers are running unmoderated tests, and everyone just goes off sort of on their own and validates. And it's become such a checkbox exercise that really, I think, brings negative value to an organization. So please, if you take away one thing, move away from the word validate as the sort of goal of research or a step in the design process and move towards the word evaluate. I think just a small change can maybe shift the mindset of the people you're working with and even yourself as you go into these studies, as you start to do usability testing and try to evaluate what you've built.
Yeah, I love that. Because the first thing people ask in usability testing is where do you start? So you start on the starting page of the product. And I always say, and Chris will know, when I first joined, here's our innovation hub. I'm like, can anyone find the hub? Not one person out of our entire department knew how to access the hub. Do they even need the hub? Let's go a layer up. Why are we even here? Let's start with those questions before we just go, ooh, do you like it? Would you buy it? Would you use it? Shazmin, what's the one takeaway you want people to go away with?
I guess for the user researchers who are trying to build a user-centered culture in their organization is before you do anything, study your organization. Try and understand what is the language of influence within the organization and try and tailor your methodology and your practice according to that. It makes a big difference. I recently transitioned into banking and guess what? They love numbers. So my kind of methods when I started off were very quantitative because nobody cared if I spoke to 5 users. So by focusing on quantitative UX research methods, I was able to kind of build the acceptance of more qualitative measures a little bit later. So the moral is just, study your organization before you start to build influence across an organization.
You know what it sounds like? If research is your product, you want to understand your users first before you build your product, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a great note to end on.
Too much here. You can also.
Yes.
So who else was playing the have a shot that someone mentions Batsy's name? What did we get to Batsy? Was it 10 in the end? I just made it 12. I'm really drunk now. But that's just a nice segue into, we do have networking here directly afterwards.
Yes.
But we're also going up to, is it Red Room or Red Bar? Or forgetting it?
It's the Radisson Red Rooftop Bar.
It's literally 2 minutes across the way, so if you want to come to us with that, we'd love it. Follow us at the Pied Piper, and we'll waiting unless you want to add. Yeah, we didn't ask you what's your one thing, sorry.
I mean, going back to the one takeaway, I think I totally agree with Shazmin. I mean, we were going to have a slightly different, more provocative voice on the panel that believes that only researchers should do research. I don't. I've always, my entire career, said anyone can do research, anyone can do design, especially these days. So I think even if this feels like, wow, these 2 experts are like amazing, I'm not there yet, get out of the building. Don't be afraid to ask for permission. Apologize. How does that saying go, Chris? Ask for forgiveness. Thank you. So get out of the building, speak to those 5 people. Maybe your organization isn't one that loves quant, and bring that back into your design, into your organization, and try to get it officially approved as well. So I think it's not being afraid to get out there and really try it out. And just a good segue to Chris and I were like, oh, next month, what are we doing? I mean, we've been super busy running Pro, ECA, meetups, but every 4 years in my religion that my dad taught me is a very holy month, and it's next month. It's the World Cup, so there will be no meetup. We will be at wherever we will be. I'll be watching England with Jack and Chris. Hopefully England will win. It's my third team after Brazil and Australia. But Jordan's in as well. So if you're Jordanian, let's go Jordan. So we would not have a meetup. We are running the workshop in a few weeks, but we will see you in September after summer. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you, Chris. Thank you everyone for coming. So yeah, 2 weeks time, but yeah, feel free to network, chat, and we will probably in another 10, 15, or if you're really, really thirsty, like now, head over to the Radisson Red.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.